Live on WFLA Now. With a specialized degree in climate, Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff Berardelli is pioneering the way we look at climate and extreme weather. Welcome to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by ArmorView Window and Door.
It is only the end of June, and we're already talking about the possibility of tropical development in the deep tropical Atlantic Ocean. That is really, really rare. And we might even have a hurricane in the Eastern Caribbean, or even before it gets to the Caribbean on the eastern side of the Lesser Antilles by Sunday and Monday. And that would be one of the first times that that has ever happened. So, of course, the questions are, how strong is this system going to get? Exactly where is it going to go? We'll talk more about the climatology in terms of what we should expect and shouldn't expect during the month of June and July, and if that portends a very active weather season ahead. And to talk about all these things, I'm bringing on my co-host.
Hi, everybody.
She's not only climate curious, she's also hurricane curious, by the way.
That's right. Did you put that on my lower third today?
No, it just says climate curious. I didn't have time to change it. I could have, because it takes a long time to write hurricane.
That's fine. No problem.
Whatever.
We'll leave it at that. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And I just wanted to remind everybody, if you watch our episodes, that I am the holder of this trusty buzzer. And today I'm matching it. That's what I wanted to say. See?
Okay.
Yellow like the sunshine.
Yeah.
So I'm matching the buzzer today. And you know how it is. If Jeff goes on a rampage and starts talking, I don't think this episode, though, I think this one's going to be pretty.
People are going to be interested in hearing what I have to talk about because it has to do with hurricanes.
I know. So I'm not going to interrupt you. Not as much.
But
let's just say that.
if you have a personal request, put it on Facebook. Please buzz Jeff. I think Val may be willing to honor those requests.
That is a great idea. Hashtag please buzz Jeff.
But more importantly, we want your questions.
That's right. So I'm going to be monitoring on our Facebook page where we're
WFLA
live right
Facebook
now.
page.
And any questions that you have for Jeff, I'll be watching that and I will make sure that he answers them for you.
Okay, so let's put up, first of all, what's happening right now. So this system now is up to a 60-80, meaning 60% chance of development in the next 48 hours and then an 80% chance of development in the long term. I will tell you that most of our computer models are in fact saying that this system is going to develop. Yeah. And there are a number of hurricane models that are forecasting this to potentially be a low-end hurricane by the end of the weekend and early next week as it crosses over the Lesser Antilles. So maybe even before it reaches Barbados. And Val, I heard you mentioning.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, when you say low end, what?
Well, a Cat 1.
Cat 1.
A Cat 1.
Okay.
But there are models that show Cat 2 or even one or two that say maybe it'll eventually be a Cat 3. So
Really?
can't take that off the table.
Okay.
It's hard to predict that when the system hasn't even formed yet. It doesn't even have a name yet. The hurricane models need a real center, a core to examine to know for sure what's going to happen in the longer term. Without that, it becomes a very uncertain forecast, both in terms of its intensity and also in terms of its track. Although the track seems pretty clear cut for the next 5 days at least, it's going to move basically directly west-northwest. But something you mentioned to me before about the rarity of a system like this forming, having a hurricane to the east of the Lesser Antilles in June.
Right. Because in June, typically we see in development in the Gulf, correct?
That's right.
In the Caribbean a little bit, but not in this area.
That's right. And so this would be only the second time that we've seen development of a hurricane in the deep tropical Atlantic to the east of the Lesser Antilles. The last time it happened was 1933, and this one may actually form slightly further east than that one formed, which would really make it the furthest south, and not so much the furthest east, but the furthest southeast that a system is formed so early in the season. So I think maybe the next question that a lot of people are saying is, okay, does this mean that it's really going to be a very active hurricane season?
Well, that's because in 1933, it went down for being one of the years where we saw the most activity, right? It was one of the top years. Yeah,
in many measures, 1933 was the most active season. 2020 had more named systems, but 1933 had a ton of very strong systems. So, yes, there is, in fact, a correlation. There is no correlation between hurricanes that form close to the United States, or I should say tropical storms or hurricanes that form close to the United States in like early June, and the overall complexion of the rest of the hurricane season. No correlation. But we switch that when storms start forming in the deep tropical Atlantic early in the season. Then there is actually a correlation. Seasons when we saw activity form this early, this far south and east, end up being very active hurricane seasons. And again, we shouldn't be surprised about any of this because water temperatures are still at record levels across all of the main development region, including the Caribbean. Neck and neck, actually, with last year, 2023.
I thought you were going to say we shouldn't be surprised because of the forecast. They're all forecasting that we're going to have an
Right, and there's a reason for that because of the record warm water temperatures and also because we're going into La Nina. We've talked about that. During La Ninas, we tend to see almost double the number of hurricanes than we do during El Ninos. So, and everything we see, all the evidence we see, including the long-range computer models, and they all point to a hyperactive season ahead.
Do you have that comparison graphic? Because I find that fascinating.
Which graph
when we
are you,
see between La Nina and El Nino.
I don't have it loaded up, but I might be able to find it.
Okay.
Okay. I don't have it loaded up right now, but the danger is that if I try to find it, it could take a minute or two. But I can try.
But I do love. It's a great visual because you can see all the storms that formed in La Nina weather pattern versus El Nino, and it's eye-opening, especially in the Gulf for us home here in Florida.
Let me see if I can find it. You keep talking.
Yeah, I do because I do want to mention something as we watch this system kind of form, and what is this going to do for the Lesser Antilles and also for our folks in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, etc.? Could this bring a lot of rain?
Yeah, well, it depends on exactly where it goes. Some computer models have it going towards Hispaniola.
Okay.
And some do not.
That's it. This is the one.
Yeah. So this is this is one of them. I have many of them, but this is only taking into account systems that pass within 400 miles of Central Florida. But you can clearly see there's a lot more of those during La Nina than there are. It's not quite double. But there's a lot more,
especially to the west of the Florida Peninsula.
Yeah, I think I have one more.
You see a lot more activity there.
Here's another one I'm going to pull in.
It's pretty enlightening.
Here's, I think, a little wider view. Okay, so this is the wider view. La Nina over the last 40 years, 103 hurricanes, and El Nino only 57. So it's almost double. So I'm glad you asked for it, and sorry, folks, it took me so long to grab it. I had to figure out where it was in my show, but it was a good point. So why don't we do this, Val? Why don't we talk about this immediate, rather than go into the climatology, let's just, because people really want to know what's going to happen here with this system.
Sure, yeah.
So
let's show you right now, by the way, they're calling it Invest 95L, correct?
That's right, Invest 95L. And there's a lot of general agreement on the track, although if you look at the ensembles, which is more than what I'm showing here, there's kind of a fork in the road when it gets to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Some of the computer models push it over Haiti and the Dominican Republic and towards Cuba. And some keep it much further south, pointed directly at Belize or Nicaragua or Honduras. So there's going to be a fork in the road when it gets to that location.
Yeah.
Now, like I've said before, I would say the consensus of most of the hurricane models and the models in general is to bring this to Cat 1, Cat 2 status. However, when it gets over the Central Caribbean, it's really going to have a hard time, and let me show you why. So let's talk about wind shear. And I know, Val, you also want to talk about Saharan dust, right? Because everybody wants to talk about the dust. But let's talk about the wind shear first. So right now, you can see it's protected in a bubble. Let me bring this full.
Yeah.
So the wind shear is indicated in red, and you can see that's way to the north. You see that clockwise flow there? That's a ridge of high pressure in the upper levels. And that is incubating this system. It's actually protecting it from all that strong wind shear to the north. And watch how that ridge of high pressure, that absence of wind shear, kind of progresses with the system. Notice how it just continually pushes. So those are the spaghetti plots to show you approximately where we think the storm's going to be on, let's say, Sunday morning. Yeah. Notice how that ridge is still to the north, keeping all that wind shear north, north and northeast of the Lesser Antilles. So here we are on 7 p.m. on Sunday, and notice it's still incubated. Yeah. It still doesn't have very much wind shear at all near it. No. It's very protected. So very much these upper-level high-pressure systems are, in fact, incubators. So now let's go forward a little bit more, okay? And let's go to, this is Monday at 10 p.m. And notice, even Monday, where the storm's supposed to be, there's no wind shear.
Right.
It's all north of San Juan.
Yeah.
But then, Val, this is the next important part here, is as we progress into the future, here we are Wednesday morning. Now, all of a sudden, it's starting to interact with more oranges and reds near Kingston, right? So when it gets near Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Jamaica, at that point, the computer models show it interacting with a decent amount of wind shear. And this is often called what we call the Caribbean graveyard. A lot of systems die in the Central Caribbean this time of year because, there's oftentimes too much wind shear. Not just, So wind shear can be broken into two separate things. Directional wind shear, where it's one type of wind near the surface and one type of wind aloft, kind of blowing in opposite directions. But it could also be speed shear, meaning that the winds at the surface are blowing at 10 miles an hour, but the winds aloft are blowing at, let me try to bring my hands in here. Yeah. The winds at the surface and aloft are blowing the same direction, but the winds at the surface only 10 miles an hour, and in aloft it may be 40 or 50, and it just blows the storm apart. So whatever that is, it's going to encounter wind shear in the central Caribbean.
But in the meantime, it's going to be moving west, and it's going to be absorbing all that energy from the water, right?
Yep.
Because it doesn't have any wind shear that's stopping it.
That's right. It is. The water temperatures are record levels. There is clearly no wind shear until we get to about Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. So until that time, it has a good chance of strengthening. I think what's limiting our imagination, and I say I mean the meteorologist community, about how strong this system could be, is that it's so rare to have a system this strong, this early, that it almost makes you think, well, is it even possible? Yeah. Well, 2024 could end up defying realities, defying the logic that we've used for, decades. It may, because it really is an unprecedented setup that we have across the Atlantic in many ways. But I'll go back to the one thing I've said before, which is until the storm actually forms, all bets are off. All bets are off. Because we need to figure out if the core of the system is strong, it's organized. Yeah. But because
I'm surprised that this is forming in the Atlantic, knowing that we are getting a heavy, dense plume of Saharan dust. However, you said to me, it's not that dense, Val. It's typical for this time of year. Tell me more about that.
It is typical. I mean, look, it's probably one of the more formidable pushes of dust we've seen so far this season, but there hasn't been that much dust. It's been probably mainly below normal. And every once in a while, we see what is a formidable area of dust that moves into the Atlantic, but this is not atypical at all. This is pretty typical for this time. And notice how the system is south of most of the dust.
I see
That's the problem. Not only that, but what I'm not showing you here, and I really should build something to show you, is that not only is the dust pretty far north, north of the center, but the center is actually in a cocoon of pretty moist air, relatively anomalously moist air for this time of year. So it's almost got its own little incubator too.
Right.
Okay. But that's the Saharan dust from now. You want to see it as we move along?
Let's see. Let's take a look at what's going to happen.
So again, you're just going to follow the spaghetti models and see how that evolves. Okay. So there we are, Saturday morning, and you notice this weekend it does interact with some Saharan dust. Okay. So we may have it may form into a tropical storm at any time over the next day or two, but it may actually struggle a little bit, until about Sunday night. Notice how by Monday morning it's shedding most of its dust. So notice most of the dust is gone now.
By Monday.
And at that point, there's nothing really inhibiting it as it moves forward. No dust, no dust, no dust, no dust through Wednesday morning. At that point, though, it should be encountering some wind shear. So, once it gets across the Lesser Antilles, it has a chance of the possibility of even some rapid intensification, although we don't think of systems this early being able to attain that kind of intensification. It can happen. And again, I think we need to move away from what we thought could happen in the past, because this year's parameters are somewhat in uncharted territory. Yeah.
Uncharted territory. I liked how you put that. But can you remind folks, why is it that we prefer Saharan dust, and what are the positive elements about Saharan dust when it comes to hurricanes?
Well, Saharan dust is associated with environments that are much drier. So it's just simply entrains dry air into the circulations. In order to get a really healthy system, you need to have moisture kind of surrounding the whole core of the system so that thunderstorms can really proliferate. And if there's too much dry air that intrudes on these thunderstorms, they dissipate, and then the system becomes buck naked. Remember I was talking about buck naked storms last week? There's that one circulation. Which
it didn't have enough.
It was the one just off the northeast Florida coast where it had a great tight circulation, but it just had no thunderstorms around it. So you need a core of moisture around it too, and dry air gets rid of that.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm going to check and see if there's any other questions that are coming in.
While you do that, I'm going to bring up some other graphics for people.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. One of the things I want to show you is just how rare it is to have a hurricane during the month of July. And the reason why I say July is this Monday. And we don't expect a hurricane until Sunday or Monday. So to be fair, we should talk about July. So let me bring this graphic up for you. and show you how many hurricanes we've had during the month of July since 1950. And it's about 43. So if you do the math there, it's about one every other year. So hurricanes during July, not common, but they're not rare. It would seem that usually towards the end of July, you would actually have in every other year, not the beginning of July, but more so the end of July, you would tend to have a hurricane maybe every other year, every 3 years or so during July. But moving this forward now, let's talk about how rare it is in the Caribbean. And since 1950, there have only been 9 hurricanes in the Caribbean during the month of July. And the way you know that there's a hurricane on this map is because it's either yellow, orange, red, purple, or pink. And those green colors just mean that it was a tropical storm. And the blue colors just indicate that it was a tropical depression. So in order to know that that's a hurricane, that one of those lines of hurricane, it has to at least have yellow in it, okay? So I'm going to bring you back on, Val.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have some questions about what's going to be happening.
Well, somebody wants to know about, do we have a cone yet?
No, and you won't get a cone until it actually gets a name. And the name of this system is likely to be Beryl. There's a lead system that is headed towards the Caribbean right now. Let me bring it up for you. Excuse me, not heading towards. It's in the Caribbean. Let me pull it up. And it's headed towards the Yucatan and eventually the Bay of Campeche. That one has about a 30% chance of development, but it's not likely to attain a name status before the one that's to the east of that, which is 95 Al. So we can't have a cone until we have a named system. And we might have that in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Very good. Somebody says that in Jamaica, they're not taking this lightly.
Yeah, and I don't think they should be taking it lightly. I do think that there's a good chance that this system is going to run into some wind shear when it gets in the central Caribbean, and that would probably weaken it. But given the fact that some of the models indicate that this could be, a 2, and maybe even a couple saying it could be a 3, once it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, to rely on the possibility it's going to interact with this wind shear before it gets to, let's say, Jamaica, I think you just have to be prepared. So I would just say this. We don't know, Val, where it goes after that.
Right.
Without knowing how strong it's going to be, without knowing when it's going to form, we can't possibly say for sure if this is just going to hit Central America or if there's some chance it may hit the U.S. or Florida. But what we can say is no reason to panic.
Yep.
It's way too early to know the details. I would just use this as an excuse to get your hurricane supply kit topped off for the rest of the season. Because one thing we do know is it's going to be an active season. And at some point, you very well may need the hurricane kit, even if it's not for this storm. And of course, the likelihood is it wouldn't be for this storm. But we don't know that for sure.
Always a good idea. Someone's saying that they're going to start paying attention if it's headed towards Florida. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can just every once in a while, clearly the person is paying attention because they're listening to our Tracking the Tropics right now. So I would just say tune in once a day, if you can, or several times a day if you'd like to, but just tune in every once in a while, listen, and if we start telling you, hey, this is looking like it may make a turn. As it stands right now, Val, I'm going to just bring you full on camera.
Yeah.
As it stands right now, in the Gulf of Mexico and in the southeast, there's a big heat dome. And that is going to likely steer the system directly into Central America. That's the most likely, but not the definite scenario.
Gotcha.
The most likely scenario is this continues moving west, just like so many of the systems have already done. We had Alberto, that made its way west across the Yucatan into the Bay of Campeche. We have the one right now. We had the one after Alberto and the one before this one.
Yeah.
They all seem to be moving in that direction, and that's because we have this heat dome across the southeast. That likely will remain intact, but there are a number of models that say that there could be enough of an opening to get it further north. So we can't rule out that this eventually gets into the Gulf, but there's certainly no reason to worry about that right now because all bets are off. It's too early.
Well, I was complaining about the temperatures, all thanks to that heat dome, but I think that now I am grateful for the heat dome because it will be steering it in a different direction. Obviously, well, it's never good, right? Any direction that a hurricane might or a storm might hit, but
right, you just don't want it hitting you.
Exactly.
So this, Val, just shows you how. This is why I say don't worry, because it's still in the 10-day zone. So that white area you see near the Cape Verde Islands, that just means the average time it takes for a system to get to us from the location where it is. You can see where the L is.
This is great, right?
So it's still at least 10 days away from getting to the U.S.
Too soon, too early.
So, and a lot can happen between now and then. So that's why I say there's no reason for anyone to panic. It just gives you so once it gets to Puerto Rico, or in that general vicinity, then it's about 4 to 6 days away from us. Then if we were going to be in a cone, we would be in the cone by then. But until then, and every system varies. That's just the average. Some systems move faster. Some systems move slower.
Gotcha. I understand. Yeah, but it's always good to, like you said, just stay tuned in and hear what's going on. But we do have a few more days before we get there, right, with more certainty.
We have plenty of time to watch it. And one thing I've learned from doing this for 30 years is that there might be changes, is definitely not might. There always will be changes. It's never something may change.
Right.
It's something's going to change, and it's going to change the forecast markedly in one way, one direction or another, one strength or another, that kind of thing. Yeah. We probably have just another 5 or 10 minutes before we have to. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we have any more questions. I just wanted to mention something regarding the cone, because since that was brought up, I know that there were some changes made from the National Hurricane Center regarding the cone, because we shouldn't really focus on the cone. I don't know if you want to take a moment to explain that. And
sure. And a lot of folks aren't going to necessarily see those reflected on television. This is an experimental thing the National Hurricane Center is doing. They want to look at the way it performs over the next couple of years. But basically what they're doing is they're adding a bunch of other stuff to the cone. And the reason is they want to emphasize inland wind warnings. They want to emphasize hurricane warnings. They don't want you to focus on the cone. And a good reason for that is, perfect example is Hurricane Ian. Naples, Florida was not in the cone.
That's right.
But Naples, Florida still had 6 feet of storm surge. So what they're trying to emphasize is that you can feel effects far outside of the cone. And the cone is only to give you a general idea of where the center of the storm is going to go. But it doesn't tell you anything about the impacts. And remember, some storms are very small and some are much larger.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, we have some interesting comments on here, like always, but no more questions for the moment.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just surprised that we are seeing in June. I know that Monday is July, you said, but that we are seeing in June something that's about to develop this far east in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised. And, I think one of the questions on people's minds has been, it's been kind of quiet. We've had Alberto. The first named storm didn't happen in May. It took a little while into June to get it. Actually, the average first hurricane, by the way, is August 11th, Val.
Okay.
So if we were to have a hurricane June 30th, or July 1st, whatever, it would be way ahead of normal.
Right.
But every season is different, and
right.
not every season is quote unquote normal. But like I said before, we were never thinking, well, if we don't see activity at the beginning of June or the end of May, then this season's not going to be as active. We were always thinking what we need to do is see when the deep tropical Atlantic comes alive, because that is where the majority of storms come from, and really the biggest ones there, or the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing what looks to be activity in an area that typically you wouldn't see until August, but we're seeing it about a month, if not earlier. Don't get me wrong. It happens every once in a while, but rarely. I think there have been something like 7 named storms since 1950, maybe even 1850. I have to check the stats on that. But only like 7 storms that have formed east of the Lesser Antilles this early in the season, before July 4th.
Right.
And so this would be in a rare group.
Do you think this will be a year where we're going to see a lot of anomalies?
I definitely do. Because water temperatures are so warm, and because we have this La Nina, which is taking shape, I'd be surprised if we didn't see some pretty surprising and almost shocking things happen this year. But then again, 2020 was a shocking season. We had 30 named storms. 2005 we had Hurricane Katrina, and then there was another Cat 5 hurricane. For whatever reason, it escapes my mind right now. I'll think of it in a few minutes. But anyway, the point is we had these huge storms moving through the Gulf of Mexico. So I think every year throws a couple of curveballs your way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking about names. How did getting names for hurricanes come about? They want to know.
Well, so I think it's a good system because it gets your attention and it makes you remember. If we didn't name systems, then they wouldn't probably get the headlines that they get. And when it comes to hurricanes, we want the headlines because we want people to key in on oh, Val is heading my way.
Yeah. There's actually a Valerie on the list for this year.
I don't want to meet that one.
I hope that
I hope we can avoid that one.
That one's spicy.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, I know, I get what you say, because it wouldn't be the same if it was like invest 95L,
Yeah, people need to easy to remember, easy to identify, and to be able to recognize it when it hits the headlines. That's what, and the way that the names are given out is by essentially it's a panel of people from all different countries that could be affected by hurricanes, including Canada, because they get affected by hurricanes sometimes. The United States, the islands in the Caribbean, Central America, and they all get together, and they are the ones who make these names. And the list is, I think it's a 6 or 7 year cycle, so that you have basically the same list every 6 or 7 years, and then names drop off based upon how strong they get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have somebody asking about that some guys in the social media are saying about a Cat 6.
Yeah, well, okay. So we've talked about this before.
We did. Didn't we have a guest on?
Yeah, I think we did, because he talked about the possibility of, I think he wrote an article about it. He wrote like a study, not a study, but more like an opinion article in a journal. And there are some scientists who think that because we're entering unprecedented territory because the water temperatures are getting so warm, and that more of these storms are going to be attaining these rare intensities, that we actually should have a Cat 6, just to wake people up to the fact that we're now transitioning into a new climate. And we are now transitioning into a very different climate than we had just 50 or 100 years ago. So, and we, are already seeing storms become more likely to be major. Like, there's something like twice the chance now that a storm makes the jump from a low-end hurricane to a major hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean than there was just 40 years ago.
Wow.
So there's been a big change.
Yeah.
The much greater proportion of storms are becoming major hurricanes. And so what we expect to see going ahead into the future is that more of these storms attain those rare intensities, 170, 180, 190 miles an hour.
Gotcha.
So there's debate about that. I don't fall into either category, actually. I don't have a strong opinion either way. Yeah.
I see. Well, there's a suggestion. Somebody says it would be nice if they would use my name on the list, Andorra. So they wanted
like
to
that.
say
Is
that.
it Andorra?
Andorra. Yeah,
Do you
just
know there's
like
a
it sounds.
country
Andorra.
I'm sure that she knows that there is a country in Europe named Andorra. It is the smallest country in Europe. Have you heard of Andorra?
I haven't heard of Andorra. No, but now I
it's
have.
a tiny little country in between Spain and France, and it's right in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Didn't you tell me about this?
Yes, because I think it's amazing.
Is that why you asked?
Yeah, because I'm so. What do you mean I didn't? What do you mean I asked?
We looked it up. Remember,
I
looked
know
it
that
up.
it's an amazing
That's
thing. It's like, wait a second, where did this country come from?
Yeah. Oh my, I love Andorra. Well, we can't forget it now.
All right, I think we're gonna have to wrap this up unless you have one more question.
I have one more question, and it's somebody that is very insistent. They want to know if you know Dennis personally. I'm assuming that they're referring to Dennis Phillips, and if you guys have had coffee.
No. Do I know Dennis? We know of each other because remember I worked here back in the late 90s and early 2000s when Dennis was working here as well. I don't know that I've ever met Dennis in person.
Okay. There you go.
Maybe one time. I know Paul Delgado. We had lunch not too long ago.
Okay.
Mike Clay and I from Bay News 9 are very good friends. We've been very good friends since I worked at Bay News 9 many, many years ago. I know Bobby Deskins, but I have never sat down and had coffee with Dennis Phillips.
Well, there you go. Tom Colombati, you wanted to know, and that's your answer.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Listen, Val, thank you again for always helping with the show. You do such a great job livening me up and making me seem human. I'm still, I don't know if people would say I've made it.
Making me seem human. Yeah. He is, guys. He is human, okay?
But I want to say to everybody, thank you for tuning in to this week's Climate Classroom. Of course, you don't have to wait for a Climate Classroom for tropical information. Each and every day, we're going to be updating you online and on television as well. Let me bring this up for you. Check our website out. You're going to see now, because we're tracking something, you're going to see multiple articles and videos every day with the latest information on what's happening in the tropics. So make sure you go to the weather tab go to Climate Classroom, and you can check out that article right there about the possibility of a hurricane in the Caribbean by early next week. It's early in the season, but it can happen. Again, Val, I want to thank you for joining me. If you guys want to listen to this both as podcast form and video form, you can watch it on YouTube. It'll be there in a couple hours. You can also watch it on WFLA.com. And in terms of a podcast, Apple Podcasts, and also Spotify. So again, thank you, Val. Thank you at home.
Thank you.
And tune in next week for the Climate Classroom. Thank you, everybody.
Talk next. Bye.
Watch or listen to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by Armor View Window and Door on WFLA social media platforms, and find Jeff's climate reports on WFLA.com.